All right, so this remediation sheet is for the circles part 1 test. There are two situations here. If you got between a 0 and a 60, you have to do this sheet. And if you do this sheet and you complete the problems that you were meant to on your own, you can bring this up to a 60. And if you want to bring the test grade up to a 70, you'll have to come in and retest. Now, if you got between a 60 and a 69, all you have to do is do this sheet and it'll raise your grade up to a 70. So one of the first things we did was we talked about the area of a circle, and your formula for this is pi r squared, where this r stands for the radius. So there's two things you need to know when you have a circle. If you have the center and it goes out from the center to the edge, that is your radius. But if you have a line that goes from edge to edge through the center, that's your diameter, and it's actually double of the radius. So I'm actually going to do this first example with you, and then you're in charge of the next two on your own. Remember, you do have to do those examples on your own to get the full credit for this. So I'm asking you this to find the area. So it's the formula we just did, pi r squared, and I need to have my radius. And remember, that radius goes from the center and stretches outward. But if you look here, we have a line that goes from edge to edge through the center. So that tells me this 24 is not my radius, it's actually my diameter. And the diameter is just double the radius, or 2 parts of the radius. So if I wanted to figure out what my radius is, it's just from the center to the edge. So I divide this by 2 and find my radius is 12. So I'm now going to plug what I know into my formula. I have this pi here. I don't do anything with it. But instead of r squared, I'm now plugging in that new radius I found, which is 12. I'm going to simplify this 12 squared. And all that means is this is 12 times 12. When I do that, I end up with 144, and I take this pi that we had here and I just put it on the end, and that is your final answer. So you are responsible for doing these two examples on your own in order to help you get the credit back from your test. So the next thing we talked about with our first part of circles was the circumference of a circle, and we actually have two formulas for that. The first one we have is 2 pi r, where again, this r still stands for your radius. And the second one we have is pi times d, and this d is what we call the diameter, and we talked about it briefly before. So you can actually use either one. It really depends on what you're given or what you want to find in the problems. So on this first one, I ask you to find the circumference. When I look here, this line goes from the center to the outside, so I know this 2 centimeters is my radius. So looking back at the two formulas we have, this first one here actually has radius in it, so I'm just going to go ahead and use that. So I know my formula here is 2 pi r. I don't do anything yet with that 2 pi, but instead of r, I'm going to replace it with this 2 from the 2 centimeters. And I'm going to multiply the 2 and the 2 together in my formula. What that does is that gives me a 4, and I just leave the pi on the end. So again, you have these two down here for you to try on your own. Be careful in this second example here because I do give you the diameter instead of just the radius. The next thing we went into was writing the equation of a circle, and we do have a general formula for that, and what that looks like is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. And there's a couple of different important things from here. The first one is that the center comes from inside the parentheses, and it's going to be h comma k. And if you notice, in the parentheses, they're minuses, outside they're pluses. So we actually change the signs for whatever those numbers are. And then, as usual, that radius is still going to be r. So that means that we would have to take the square root of this to find our radius or go backwards. So in this first example, I'm asking you to write the equation using the following information. And I give you the center and I give you the radius. So I am going to rewrite at the top that formula, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So our center, I told you, was our h and our k. So that 15 is going to represent h, negative 6 is k, and the radius 2, that's going to be our r. So when I start to write this in parentheses, I'm going to do x, and I now need my h, but I need the opposite of it. So when I look here, my h is 15. So when I put it in parentheses, it's going to be a negative 15. You still have the squared as part of the formula. Plus, we're going to do the same thing again, y. And I look at my k, it's a minus 6 here. So in parentheses, it's going to be a plus 6. squared, and it's equal to, I take this number here, 2, and I square it, or 2 times 2. And when I do that, I end up with a 4 here. So again, you are going to do these bottom two. We're asking you to write the equation. You have to attempt all these problems if you want to get your credit back from your test. All right, there were 2 more things we got into in this unit, and the first one, or the next last one, was sector area. There is a formula for this as well. And the way that it starts off with is x degrees over 360, because there's 360 degrees in a circle, times pi r squared. So I'm going to do one example. You're going to do 2 on your own. When you look at the diagram, and we're trying to figure out what the x degrees is and what the r is. The x degrees has this little tiny circle. There's only one thing in this picture that has a little circle, and that happens to be 240. So when I go to set it up, I do 240 over 360 times pi, and then our radius here is 6 squared. So you can actually take this all right here and plug it straight into your calculator, and it will give you a reduced answer back. When you do plug this into the calculator, though, you should end up with 24 pi, and that is your final answer. For arc length, the formula is very similar. What you'd start off with is the same, so x degrees over 360. The only thing that changes is what's in parentheses, and it is 2 pi r. So when I look over at this example, again, same rules apply. Whatever has a little degree mark goes on top of the fraction, so that is 210 over 360 times, I have 2 pi, and my radius in this problem is 9. So again, we're going to go ahead and plug all of this straight into the calculator. And when you plug that straight in, you should get 21 pi over 2. So remember, all of these problems that I did not do in this video, you are responsible for trying on your own. They follow the same as what I did in the examples. You will turn this into your teacher. As we stated before, there are 2 situations. If you made between a 0 and a 60, this paper alone brings your grade up to a 60. If you want a 70, you do have to come retest in tutorials. If you made between a 60 and a 69, this paper only will raise your grade up to a 70.